All right, today we're going to dive into something pretty revolutionary, a whole new way of looking at autism. And it's a story that doesn't start with psychology, but with physics, with a hidden signal that's buried inside our most simple, everyday movements. To get our heads around it, let's start with a little experiment.
Okay, so right now, wherever you are, I want you to do something super simple. Just reach out your hand and pretend to grab an imaginary cup of coffee that's sitting right in front of you. Go on, just reach out and wrap your hand around it.
Feels pretty simple, right? To your eyes and to your brain, that was one smooth, continuous action. Your brain had a thought, sent a signal, and your hand just did it. But what if I told you that whole smooth movement is basically an illusion?
Yeah, because if we could hook you up to some seriously high-frequency sensors, the kind they used in the research we're exploring today, we wouldn't see a nice, smooth line at all. What we'd see instead is more like a storm.
And this is where it gets wild. What you feel is that nice, smooth arc on the left. But what's really happening, what these sensors pick up 240 times a second, is the reality you see on the right. It's this chaotic storm of tiny jitters, of little accelerations and decelerations that you're completely unaware of.
So for years, neuroscientists basically looked at all this jitter and called it noise, like static on a radio. It was just considered trash data, something you filter out and ignore to find the real signal underneath.
But here is the massive what if, at the center of this research from Elizabeth Torres and her colleagues. What if that static isn't trash? What if it's actually the most important part of the signal? What if it's a biological fingerprint that could be the most accurate biomarker for autism we have ever seen?
So how do you even test an idea like that? Well, you have to find a way to decode that noise, to see if there's a unique fingerprint hiding inside.
The experiment itself was incredibly simple. All people had to do was reach out and touch a dot on a screen. But the researchers weren't looking at the big, obvious movement. Nope, they were analyzing the noise. And in that noise, they found a brand new metric they called the R parameter. R is basically a measure of predictability. It asks a simple question. Is your nervous system using what it did a millisecond ago to plan what it's doing right now? Is there a pattern in the static?
And the difference they found was just night and day. In neurotypical people, the R value is high. Their micro-movements, their noise actually has a structure. It's organized, kind of like a melody, where one note helps you predict the next. But for the participants with ASD, the R value is super low. The signal was random, totally memoryless, like flipping a coin over and over and over. It's as if their nervous system was hitting a reset button every single millisecond.
And get this is the part that is just incredible. Using only that R number, ignoring everything else, no eye contact, no social behavior, none of it, they could classify who was neurotypical and who had ASD with 95.45% accuracy. Let that sink in. Just from the tiny jitters and how a person reached for a dot on a screen?
And this tells the story about how we develop too. Turns out we all start out pretty noisy. At age 3, a typically developing kid has a low R value, a lot like the ASD profile. But as they grow up, their R value just skyrockets. Their nervous system learns how to organize and control that signal. For the group with ASD, though, that maturation just kind of plateaus. It stays at that toddler level.
This quote really drives it home. What the research shows isn't that the system is broken, but that it's sort of stalled out in a state of arrested development, at least when it comes to this one aspect of motor control.
But wait, it gets even more fascinating. The team started to wonder, could this be hereditary? So they decided to test the parents of the kids with ASD. And what they found? Well, nobody saw this coming.
Okay, you have to hear this. These parents were all considered neurotypical. They had no diagnosis whatsoever. But when they got tested, 17 out of the 20 had the exact same low R value, the same random movement noise as their children. They were walking around their whole lives with this hidden signature, but had subconsciously built these incredibly complex workarounds to manage it.
So what does it actually feel like to live with that kind of internal static? The best analogy the researchers came up with is driving a car with a big problem.
So just imagine you're driving down the highway, but your steering wheel is loose. You turn it a little bit, nothing happens. So you turn it a little more, and suddenly the car lurches to one side. The feedback is just totally unreliable. It's chaotic, you can't trust it. Now, if you were driving that car, what would you be doing? You'd have a white-knuckle grip on that wheel. You wouldn't be messing with the radio, you wouldn't be looking at the scenery, and you are definitely not having a casual conversation with the person in the passenger seat. Why? Because 100% of your focus is just on keeping the car on the road. Well, in this analogy, social interaction, that's the passenger.
This corrupted feedback makes the simple act of existing an incredibly demanding task.
But this research wasn't just about measuring the problem. The team wanted to know if people could learn to fix it themselves. This led to a pretty radical therapeutic idea they called the magic box experiment.
Here's how it worked. A nonverbal child sits in front of a screen. In the air in front of them, there's an invisible digital zone. As the child just moves their arm around randomly, stimming, flapping, whatever, their hand eventually crosses into that zone. The second it does, bam, their favorite cartoon comes on. The second their hand leaves the zone, the video stops.
And this is the most important part. They gave the kids 0 instructions. No one said, put your hand here. The child had to discover the cause and effect all by themselves. This wasn't about following directions, it was about agency. Because they made it happen, their brain paid attention in a whole new way. The results were just stunning. As the children learned to control the reward, their movement signatures literally began to transform. That chaotic, coin flip noise started to become organized and structured. They were, in real time, teaching their own nervous systems how to quiet the static and find the signal. They were tightening their own steering wheel.
What's really fascinating is that the reward had to be personal. For many of the kids, the most powerful reward wasn't a cartoon at all. It was a live video of themselves, a kind of digital mirror. It provided this perfect immediate feedback loop. I move, the image moves. That was powerful enough to close that broken sensory gap.
When you step back and look at all of this, it really represents a profound shift, a new paradigm in how we think about, diagnose, and maybe even support people on the autism spectrum.
You know, the old paradigm was all about psychology. It was about correcting behavior, suppressing movements like stimming, basically trying to get rid of the noise. This new paradigm is based in physics. It says, let's not suppress the noise, let's try to understand it and help the person discover their own signal within it. And this is the thought I really want to leave you with. We spend so much energy telling neurodivergent kids to have quiet hands or to sit still. But this research suggests that all that movement might not be a distraction from learning. What if that movement is the brain's attempt to learn? It just makes you wonder, what other capabilities are locked away, just waiting for us to provide the right kind of mirror?